I will discuss in this paper the relationship between what's called facilitation, as really as facilitations, whether it was systems or programs. And here, this is what I call the joint chaos in Jenin camp. And when I say the Jenin camp, I don't say about the place as much as I'm talking about the case and what it expresses. I will start. As for facilitations that were seen and have increased in Jenin in 2005, did not bring in the spirit of attacks and political mobilization as what happened in Jenin's context, which I will address later. Despite that, the linkage of many sectors from the city and the camp and the rural areas in such facilitations, this is what created some beneficiaries who beneficiary groups who some confront this resistance for their own interest, and this is the model of Jenin that has been presented. This is what I will go to discuss in details. 2007, 2009 have witnessed big as a by the quartet that it was a model that would push towards regaining peace in the West Bank through the national authority that was described as the moderate in return of the extremist Islamist movements in order to make it to a productive negotiations. Despite the political authority and executive committee that it's the responsibility of the quartet to push Israel to stop its settlement activities. However, this model had been launched in Jenin in May 2008 through what was called a peace and hope movement. This peace and movement, this peace and smile has movement have allowed the movement under the slogan of sovereignty um, prevalence that was erupted after the demolition of the infrastructure of the West Bank after March and April 2002. This was preceded in 2005 by forming two committees to follow up and the refugee, those attacked and those who are followed by after they've signed pledges that in order to get the amnesty from Israel after a sequence of things and which limited its their movement and travel in line with the security and political path. It was its peak in Annapolis conference end of 2007. The convoy of the quartet, Tony Blair, had architected an economic plan that was called the Hope. It's a comparative that was tested by different administrations that was based on economy. Blair presented at the beginning the meeting of 50 Palestinian businessmen with 50 Israeli businessmen to have joint projects on the Green Line borders, and that Palestinian businessmen will given BIB cards. In 2008, the U.S. State of minister when it visited Condoleezza Rice, she visited Jenin, and she saw that nothing is impossible, and she really promoted the practice of 2000 and performance of the Palestinian security force had gone way far to be able to expose all these practices. Despite some projects that were presented by the Palestinian government in coordination with the quartet and donors and the facilitation of Israel on the Jalama crossing. However, Israel was preparing its system in its vision on two bases. That the first is the covering or packaging, and the second is unilateral. Israel it tries systematically and cumulatively since its occupation in 1967 to encompass the borders of 1967 politically and socially to make so that it controls the elites under in very well studied borders. This cannot be considered as Yes, and even the idea of separation was there always in the discussions of the with the Israeli government 1967. However, Rabin had revived it after 1992, especially with the separation plan of 1995, in line with its the Israeli fundamentals. All despite the negotiations with Olmert and so on, this have been established in the Intifada, and this is about not having a Palestinian partner. This is what was reiterated in 2006, that we did not we're not going to withdraw militarily because we don't have a partner. So the complete transformation of lands in the West Bank and the giving it to Palestinians will happen only after having a Palestinian Authority that can prove that it will be able to fight terrorism. So the meaning that the Palestinian Authority is requested to and demanded to provide to prove that it is able and adequate to fight and combat terrorism. Then Herzliya conference in 2009 clearly presented this vision, economic vision, in its own document, which had where it was referred to 2 points, main points. It's the establishment of civil and military infrastructure, and here I quote, which serves the well-being of Palestinian people and encouraging commercial activities in Judaism and the West Bank, and which here promoted the need to promote the investment climate. Examples of this, and I'm talking here about Jenin, the Jenin state, where there was a tangible change, where we see security and economic stability, which was achieved because of the police forces and the projects of the EU. So Jenin wasn't selected randomly to be the case, the pilot for the political and economic transformation. And here the report that evaluates the Jenin in 2009, and this Jenin was selected. It was one day the place of suiciders, and I quote from the quartet that works with the Palestinian Authority and Israel as a way to examine how can this elevate the dire economic situation, which at first the Al-Jalame crossing. Al-Jalame crossing is the where the flow comes in and out of the city, and even from 2009, only a limited number of of Palestinians were able to cross it, and it was by foot. And since it was, and although this crossing, Jenin's is basically agricultural and economic, so its movement was limited. Today, 3,000 cars come to Jenin, vehicles come to Jenin from the 1948 lands, and the number increases by the week, and which means 80% of the market movement. Also, this crossing guarantees the commercial trucks moving from Jenin that release their goodies door to door to transfer the commodities, as happens in this sector. As for the donor return, Jenin has benefited from this, especially after the Paris Protocol and the Sustainability and Development Plan in 2008. This had reflected the economic growth, and it had allowed that laborers and traders in 2009 2000 to move on, and in 2020 Israel has facilitated the bigger flow of Palestinians into the 1948 lands, and establishing 12 electronic gates. Every day there's around 11,000 workers move officially. They go from Jenin to Israel. As for the banking facilities, Jenin has benefited from this as other areas, and the loans that were presented by the banks, provided by the banks in the first half of 2020 was $376 million. The main point here is the informal exits or And according to the Palestinian, to the Israeli security, there's a big number who are security bad to get into Israel. So this is where Jenin stood out. It had many openings, and many informal workers flowed into Israel, and without being noticed by Israel. And but this was stopped recently. In parallel, the civil administration have launched its campaign about the security lifting. Lately was the campaign to lift the security um, um, uh, force in the camp, and they've targeted 125 Palestinians that were banned to enter. The products of this matrix, two main points. The first is the having new beneficiaries, and these groups have benefited on the and depended on the crossing, and it does not, of course, include all businessmen and merchants, and it's not one group. There are different groups in different locations. This segment over exceeds the Palestinian structure, and many of them communicate directly with the Israeli administrative policy. So this is something that was stood in the face of in 2011 to 2015 and 16 in the what's called the ninth intifada, and they moved from one place to another to encounter this intifada and to speak with the youth. In 2021, a manifestation from the fur merchants worked towards this crossing and demanded that the Israeli authorities open it, and that was after the emergence of the pandemic. A big part of these groups are part of this chaos movement that Jenin undergoes, and which preceded the struggle that's happening nowadays. Everybody knows Jenin, and all who go to Jenin understand that there is this chaos situation in the street, in the market, in different life arena. The second point is to impartial the Intifada generation to make them in, because this generation was transformed from beneficiary from the facilitations to getting permits directly or after the security lifting campaigns, and so this started to work in the 1948 lands, or benefiting in stabilizing their work in the commercial field within the city. So this generation is keeping away from this affairs of the city. However, this system is there because there's this economic comparative that is based on not to be fragile and selective, which will lead to in order to lead real economic growth. This is what is referred to in the industrial zone in Jenin was, and the cornerstone of it was laid in 2000 and in 1990, and but still nothing on the ground was achieved, and this would lead to in the transformation of the style of economy, and this is what Israel wants, and this contradicts with the packaging policy. As there was also a widening in the class gap. There's a new liberal system that is on with these distorted facilitations that to produce the class differences that is increasing between the city and the camp. So this chaos. And accordingly, Israel had closed its eyes upon. And as for the weapons, and everybody know the passing of the former governor of Jenin in this regard. Also, there are attacks. More than one occasion happened between the security forces and groups of whether resilience or the camp or from the city to in order to confiscate weapons and so on. So it's clear that this chaos proved that the Palestinian security forces are incapable to face this, whether in the lifestyle or systematically. And of course, we need to mention that the pandemic had affected greatly the capacity of security forces to be able to control. And this is when they wanted to emerge in Kabatia, they've faced them and countered them and threw stones on them. What regarding the political dimension about the facilitation system, Israel did not stop invading Jenin since 2002. And based on this, because there was no Palestinian counterpart, which when we said it's a unilateral issue. Jenin has a lively memory. Students learn very early, at the very early stages, that Mahmoud Khattab, there is this poet that was done. Uh, and the Battle of Jenin, 1948. Jenin is the only city that was occupied, and then it was freed by in 1948. This is part of the culture that is known and widespread in the city, which makes it different than other cities. Chanting about its memory of 1948, and then Dina Qassam, and then the memoir of the camp. But these are memoirs that travel from or transfer from one generation to another. There's also a contradiction between the Palestinian comparative politically, and it's the political comparative that is related to independence, and then the military comparative, which was able to be taken forcefully. What's happening now in the community? We see that the movements there is. In 2015, there was this attack between Hamza Abu Haija, who was assassinated, along a number of resistance elements, and then these attacks continued, and up till now, this generation is making their own symbols, and they're not borrowing them from the Palestinian. They have a symbol called Jamil Amouri in Nablus, their symbol Ibrahim Nabulsi. So this symbol is expresses and is very similar to it. So this generation has benefited from this chaos situation where the authority was kept away. And I say this is and we see that this is the case where people is this domination is still happening. So and this is what makes these clashes difficult to be fought by closure, by the Israeli forces, by closure, and so on. So Israel has two options: either collective punishments, or closing the crossings, or um, annulling the permits. So with the specificity of the situation, it's difficult, and it had closed the crossing past September, but then it retreated back and opened it again, or the focused operations that are being done nowadays. Palestinian Authority have used, on the Palestinian arena, it took the shape of a long-term intifada, and I see that those beneficiaries and the new strugglers became this clashing became sure, and what's noted is that they have awareness and have the idea of reconciliation with them, and to transfer from being followers to leaders. Israel cannot also overcome the sovereignty it has. And what's noted here is what's happening on the ground is to prepare for the adequate infrastructure. This is new. This is part of the managing the Israeli conflict, Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and can this situation and reality that's happening in Jenin and the clashing that happens, would it align with the facilitations, and can Israel overcome these ceilings and move on from these facilitations, maybe to a different economic status? These are all open questions to be discussed. Thank you.